Your daughter has been awake since 4 in the morning. She's 6 years old. She's dragging her little backpack behind her, and the only thing keeping her going is the promise you made her. The window seat. The one you paid extra for. The one where she can press her nose to the glass and watch the clouds. And when you finally reach that seat, tired down to your bones, there's a designer handbag sitting right where your child is supposed to sit. The woman it belongs to looks up at you, looks at your jeans and your worn jacket and your little girl, and she does not move a thing. What would you do? What would you do if a stranger blocked your child's seat and the crew looked at you like you were the problem? Marcus Bell stopped at the entrance to first class with his daughter's hand tucked inside his. The cabin lights glowed soft and white. Somewhere ahead of him, ice clinked against crystal. Suit jackets rustled. The low hum of the aircraft wrapped around everyone like a promise of comfort, of first-class ease, of a morning that was going to go exactly the way people up here expected their mornings to go. Marcus wasn't thinking about any of that. He was thinking about the small, warm weight of Maya's hand, and the fact that she'd finally stopped asking, "Are we there yet?" somewhere around the security line. He was thinking about the promise. He'd made it to her the night before, sitting on the edge of her bed. "You get the window, baby girl. We watch the clouds together, just like Mama used to do with you." That was the whole reason he'd paid for the upgrade he couldn't really afford. 2 seats. First class. Phoenix to Dallas. Because this trip mattered. Because it was the first time they were flying to see her grandmother since the funeral, and he'd be damned if his little girl spent it crammed in a middle seat in the back learning, one more time, that the world didn't save nice things for people like them. He checked the boarding passes again, even though he knew them by heart. 2A and 2B. Window and aisle. Paid in full. Then he saw her. A woman in a pale gray blazer sat in 2C, 1 seat over, and spread across 2A and 2B, across both of the seats that belonged to him and his daughter, was her handbag. A large, buttery leather thing with gold hardware, set down like a passenger of its own. Beside it, a folded cashmere wrap, a travel pillow, a bottle of sparkling water, sweating a ring onto the tray she'd pulled down. She had not just taken a seat, she had claimed the whole row. Marcus stood there for 1 silent second, and in that second the whole cabin seemed to notice him. A tall black man in a dark jacket and jeans, holding the hand of a small girl in light-up sneakers. No flashy watch, no entourage, no assistant clearing his path. Just a tired father trying to get his daughter to her window seat. But Claire Ashford saw something else. She looked up from her phone, her pale eyes gliding over him from his shoes to his face, then dropping to Maya, and her mouth tightened before he said a single word. Marcus knew that look. He'd seen it in bank lobbies and hotel lounges and school pickup lines where the other parents assumed he was the driver. He'd seen it in waiting rooms, in car dealerships, in the pause a hostess takes before deciding whether to seat you by the window or by the kitchen door. It was the look people gave when they had already written a story about you, and were only waiting for you to prove them right. He took a slow breath. He was good at slow breaths. 15 years of a certain kind of training had made him very, very good at the thing right before the thing. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, keeping his voice easy. "I think you might have your things on our seats. We've got 2A and 2B. Claire blinked once. Then she gave a small laugh with no warmth anywhere inside it. "I'm sorry?" Her voice was sharp enough to cut through the soft cabin noise. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper an inch. A woman 2 rows up glanced back from her tablet. Marcus held the boarding passes out, calm and steady. 2A and 2B. Windows for my daughter. She's been looking forward to it all week. Claire did not reach for the passes. She looked at them the way you'd look at something that had been left on your seat by mistake. And then she leaned back into 2C as if the whole conversation were beneath her. "I always spread out on this row," she said. "I fly this route constantly. There's plenty of room in the back for a child. She'll be more comfortable back there anyway, closer to the restrooms." Behind Marcus, boarding slowed. A suitcase wheel squeaked. Somebody exhaled a little too loudly. Maya tugged gently on her father's hand and looked up at him with that quiet, searching expression kids get when they can feel the air in a room change but don't yet have the words for it. "Daddy, is this not our seat?" "It's our seat, baby. Give me 1 second." At the front galley, flight attendant Lena Hartwell turned her head. She was 33, neat uniform, tight smile, eyes trained by years of customer service to sense trouble before it became official. But even before she started walking over, she had already done the math the way she'd been quietly trained to do it. The older woman looked expensive. The man looked inconvenient. The child made it complicated. And complicated was the thing Lena least wanted 3 minutes before the doors closed. Marcus felt the shift. Not loud, not spoken, but real. The temperature of the cabin had a color to it now, and it wasn't in his favor. He crouched down instead of stepping forward, got himself lower than Claire, lower than everyone, down to Maya's height. It was a small thing, but the man across the aisle noticed it. You could see a big man decide, on purpose, to make himself smaller for a child. "Hey," Marcus said softly to his daughter. "Remember what we said about staying calm even when grown-ups forget their manners?" Maya nodded solemnly. "We stay kind. We don't get loud." "That's my girl. Stand right here by Daddy for 1 minute." He stood back up, and that was when Lena arrived. "Is there a problem here?" Lena asked, forcing brightness into her voice. Claire turned fast, grateful for an audience. "Yes, there is. This man is standing over me, demanding I move my things. I was seated peacefully, and he just started. I have flown this airline for years, and I have never been spoken to like this." Marcus's eyes moved to Lena. They were steady, tired, and sharp. "My boarding passes say 2A and 2B. Her bag's on both of them. I asked her, politely, to move it so my daughter can sit down. That's the whole story." "He didn't ask," Claire said. "He loomed." Ruth Palmer, in 1C, tightened her hand around the strap of her purse. She was 71, a retired schoolteacher. And she had spent 36 years reading children's faces for fear and grown-ups' faces for lies. She could hear the lie in Claire's voice before the sentence even finished. Loomed, a man asking for the seat he bought, with a 6-year-old at his side, and the woman reached for the biggest word she had. "Ma'am," Lena said to Claire. Careful, gentle. "May I see your boarding pass?" Claire's jaw flexed. For the first time, a small crack opened in her confidence. "It's on my phone somewhere." "Honestly, does it matter? I'm in first class. The seat's a first-class seat. What difference does the letter make?" "It matters to my daughter," Marcus said quietly. "She's got a name on a ticket, same as you." Claire unlocked her screen with a sharp tap and thrust the phone toward Lena. The movement impatient, almost royal. Lena looked down. 2C. Just 2C. 1 seat, not 2A, not 2B. A single first-class seat that the woman had turned into a throne, with her handbag crowned on the seat of a child. Lena felt heat rise behind her collar. Marcus saw it. Claire saw it too. And for one thin second, the truth stood in the aisle with all of them, plain, undeniable, unarguable. Seats 2A and 2B belonged to Marcus Bell and his daughter, and the woman knew it now, and everyone standing close enough knew it too. Then Claire leaned toward Lena and lowered her voice just enough to make it sound private, but not enough to keep the cabin from hearing. "Honey," she said, "just move them. There are open seats in the back. It's a child, for heaven's sake. She'll fall asleep anywhere. Don't make this a whole thing right before we push back. Move them." The words landed soft, but Marcus felt every ounce of their weight. He had been moved his whole life. Moved to the back. Moved to another line, another window, another representative who could better assist you. He had learned to smile through it, to keep his voice level. To be so unfailingly calm that no one could ever pin the discomfort on him. And he had promised himself, the day they lowered his wife into the ground and he drove home alone with a car seat in the back and a 6-year-old asking why Mama wasn't waking up, that there was one thing he would never teach his daughter by letting it happen in front of her. He would never teach her to disappear. "No," Marcus said. Claire blinked. Lena froze. "No," he said again, and it wasn't loud, and that's what made people turn. "My daughter is going to sit in the window seat I bought her. All you have to do is move your bag." Before we go any further, this channel is brand new, and every single subscribe is what keeps stories like this one alive. It's free, it takes 1 second, and it means more to us than you'll ever know. Tap subscribe, tell us down in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and let's get right back into it. Claire's face reddened. "There it is," she said, folding her arms and pitching her voice loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "People always have to turn everything into a battle." Ruth Palmer raised an eyebrow from 1C. People, not he. People. The old teacher had heard enough coded language across 4 decades to know exactly what it sounded like when someone reached for the polite word and meant the ugly one. Marcus stayed still. He had spent a long time learning that silence wasn't weakness. Silence gave other people room to reveal themselves. And people always did. 2 rows back, a retired man named Frank Delaney quietly took off his reading glasses and folded them into his shirt pocket. Frank was 66, 22 years in the Navy and more friends buried than he cared to count. He was watching the tall man in 2A's aisle with an expression that had nothing to do with the seat dispute. He was watching the stillness, the squared shoulders, the way the man had crouched to his kid's level, then risen without a wasted motion, the way his weight sat evenly on both feet, hands loose and open at his sides. Frank had spent 2 decades around men who stood like that. You didn't learn it in a customer service seminar. Huh. Frank thought. I've seen that quiet before. He didn't say it out loud. Not yet. "Ma'am," Lena tried again, her voice thinning. "Perhaps if we just moved your bag to the overhead." "No," Claire snapped. "Absolutely not. It has to stay with me. It's got my medication, my documents. I'm not putting a $5,000 bag in a bin so he can prove a point." She pointed a manicured finger in Marcus's direction without quite looking at him. "I boarded early. I'm settled." He can be flexible. That's all I'm asking. A little flexibility. Marcus almost smiled. Not because it was funny, because he'd heard that exact sentence his entire life, in a dozen different rooms. Be flexible. Bend, fold, move. Always him. Always the one asked to make room. His father's voice came to him then, the way it always did in these moments, low and worn as an old coin. "Son, people can deny you your respect. Don't ever help them by denying it to yourself." Marcus looked down at Maya. She was watching the whole thing with those big, careful eyes, and she was learning something right now whether he liked it or not. The only question was what? He made his choice. "I'm not going to be flexible about my daughter," Marcus said, and he said it gently, almost kindly, which somehow made it land harder than shouting ever could. "I bought her that window. I made her a promise about that window. And I'm not going to move her to the back of the plane so you can keep a seat you didn't pay for. All you have to do, the only thing you have to do, is pick up your bag." The cabin had gone very quiet. Claire's lips parted, closed, opened again. And then she reached for the one move she had left. The move that had never once failed her in 51 years of life. She looked at Lena, and her eyes went glassy, and her hand pressed against her chest, and her voice dropped into something small and trembling and wronged. "He's frightening me," she whispered. I don't feel safe." The word moved through first class like cold air under a door. Safe. Ruth Palmer's mouth fell open. Frank Delaney sat forward, slow and deliberate. Across the aisle, a nurse named Emily Carter, 39, flying to Dallas to meet her first grandchild, quietly lifted her phone and, without a word, started to record. She had spent 20 years watching people in real pain, and she knew the difference between fear and performance the way a carpenter knows the difference between oak and plywood by the sound it makes when you knock on it. This was plywood. But it didn't matter what Emily knew, or what Ruth knew, or what Frank knew. It only mattered what the word safe did to a flight attendant 3 minutes before pushback. Because safe was the word that opened doors no truth could easily close. Safe summoned managers. Safe summoned captains. Safe turned a father asking for his daughter's seat into a security concern in the official language of the sky. Lena straightened up. Something in her had shifted, and not in a good direction. Fear had a way of making people choose the loud complaint over the quiet truth. "Sir," she said, and her voice had changed. Cooler now, more formal, the customer service sanded off it. "I'm going to need you to step back and give the passenger some space. And I'm going to get my cabin manager." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "You're getting your manager," he said, because a woman put her purse on a child's seat and then cried about it. "Sir, I haven't raised my voice," Marcus said. "I haven't touched anyone. I haven't stepped 1 inch closer than I'm standing right now. My daughter is holding my hand. Look at her. Look at the person you're calling a threat, and then look at his hands, and tell me what you actually see." Lena did not look. She couldn't. She turned on her heel and walked briskly toward the front galley, and she picked up the interphone, and she said the words that would change the temperature of everything to come. And down in 3D, Frank Delaney watched Marcus Bell stand in that aisle, patient, unmoving, one large hand resting warm on his little girl's shoulder. And the old sailor felt something cold and certain settle in his gut. He'd been wrong about one thing. That wasn't just any quiet. That was the quiet of a man who already knew, from long practice, exactly what he was capable of, and had decided, for his daughter's sake, not to need it. Yet the man who stepped out of the front galley wore a dark vest, a silver name pin, and the tired expression of someone who believed every problem on an airplane could be solved with the right amount of pressure applied to the right person. His name was Nolan Pierce. Senior cabin manager, 46. Polished the way airline veterans get polished, smooth hair, controlled smile. Eyes that measured a person in under a second and rarely bothered to measure twice. 18 years of delays and complaints and entitled flyers had taught him one core skill: how to sound perfectly calm while choosing a side before a single fact arrived. His eyes moved across the scene. The woman by the window, flushed, one hand pressed dramatically to her chest. The flight attendant, stiff, holding her tablet like a shield. And the tall man standing in the aisle, quiet, unhurried, a little girl tucked against his hip. Nolan did not like what he saw, not because the woman was obviously right, because the man was too calm, and a certain kind of calm, in Nolan's long experience, was just another word for a challenge to his authority. "What seems to be the issue here?" Nolan asked. Claire answered before anyone could breathe. "This man is intimidating me." I was seated peacefully, and he began demanding I give up my things, and now I don't feel safe with him standing over me and over all of us. "That's a lie," Frank Delaney said from 3D. And his voice was flat and hard as a dock plank. "Every word of it. I've been watching since he walked on." He crouched down to talk to his own kid, and he asked her twice, politely, to move the bag. "That's the whole crime." Nolan's eyes flicked to him. "Sir, please stay in your seat and let us handle this." Frank's jaw tightened, but he sat back. He'd taken orders most of his life. He knew the difference between authority and wisdom. And he knew he was looking at the first kind wearing the costume of the second. Marcus spoke next, and he kept it to the facts, laid out clean and flat like tools on a cloth. "My boarding passes are for 2A and 2B. Her boarding pass is for 2C. Your own flight attendant confirmed it 30 seconds ago. Her handbag is sitting on my daughter's seat. I asked her to move it. She won't." That's the entire situation. Nolan held out a hand. "May I see your passes?" Marcus handed them over. Nolan looked down. 2A. B. His mouth tightened. Then he turned to Lena. Her pass? Lena hesitated. That hesitation said more than any report ever could. It's 2C, she admitted. The cabin heard it. Phones rose another inch. But I always take this row, Claire said quickly, sensing the ground move under her. Everyone knows me on this route. I have never been treated this way in my life. Marcus looked at her, and he thought about how many people confuse discomfort with oppression. A woman being asked to move her purse off a child's chair had just called it the worst treatment of her life. And a man asking for the seat he'd bought for his daughter had been called a threat. That was how it worked. Bias reversed gravity. It made the person standing on solid ground look like the one causing everyone else to fall. Nolan handed the passes back to Marcus, but he did not hand back the seat with them. Mr. Bell, he said carefully, in the interest of an on-time departure, I'm going to ask for your cooperation here. Marcus's eyes sharpened. My cooperation? Yes, sir. We have open seats in the main cabin. I can move you and your daughter, offer you a travel credit, a meal voucher for the little one. You want to move the 6-year-old to the back, Marcus said slowly, so that the woman with the bag can keep the seats she didn't pay for. Ruth Palmer said, unbelievable, to no one in particular. Claire leaned back, the faintest glow of victory returning to her face. Let me make sure I understand you, Marcus said, and his voice dropped, not louder, lower, that dangerous quiet that made people lean in. You've confirmed I'm assigned to 2A and 2B. You've confirmed she's assigned to 2C. And your solution is to move my daughter to the back of the plane. Nolan's smile stayed fixed. I'm asking you to help us avoid a delay. The delay, Marcus said, is the bag on my daughter's seat. Claire gasped like she'd been struck. How dare you? Marcus didn't even look at her. He looked at Nolan, and he read the silver pin, slow and deliberate. Nolan Pierce. Are you officially instructing me to move my child from a seat I paid for so that another passenger can keep it because she prefers it? Nolan's eyes narrowed. I'm instructing you to comply with crew direction. There it was. The turn. From customer service to command. From fairness to obedience. From facts to force. And it was in that exact silence, that brittle, humming silence where everyone in first class understood the machine had just changed gears, that a small, clear, absolutely fearless voice cut through the cabin. Maya's voice. She'd been quiet the whole time, the way kids go quiet when they're trying to understand something too big for them. And now she tugged on her father's jacket, and she looked up at all the tall, angry grown-ups, and she asked the question that every single adult in that cabin would carry with them long after they'd forgotten the flight number. Daddy, Maya said. Did we do something wrong? The cabin stopped breathing. Are we in trouble? Is it because of me? I can sit in the back. I don't need the window. Please don't be mad at my daddy. For one long, terrible second, nobody said anything at all. Ruth Palmer pressed a hand flat against her chest, as if something in there had cracked. Emily Carter's eyes filled, and her phone trembled, but she held it steady. Because some things need a witness. Frank Delaney turned his face toward the window and worked his jaw hard, a Navy man who'd buried friends without crying, now blinking fast at a 6-year-old's question. And even Lena, who had started this by walking to that interphone, even Lena had to look down at her own hands. Because a child had just asked, in front of all of them, whether she was the reason the world had turned cold, whether she'd done something wrong simply by existing in a seat with her name on it. Marcus crouched back down. He got low, right to her eye level, and he took both her small hands in his one large one, and when he spoke his voice was as steady and warm as a hand on a fevered forehead. But the people close enough to see his eyes saw that it cost him everything he had. No, baby, he said. You did nothing wrong. You hear me? Not one thing. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. Grown-ups make mistakes sometimes, and when they do, we stay kind and we stay calm. And we don't disappear. We never disappear. That's the promise. Say it back. We never disappear, Maya whispered. That's my girl. He stood back up, and the man who rose from that crouch was different than the man who'd knelt. Not louder, not angrier. Just settled, the way water goes still right before it goes deep. If this story's got you holding your breath right now, do us a quick favor. Subscribe, drop a like, and tell us down in the comments, at this exact moment, would you have stayed calm, or would you have lost it? Be honest. There's a whole lot more where this came from, every week, right here on Dad Untold Chronicles. Claire, rattled by the silence a child's question had dropped on the room, did the worst possible thing a cornered person can do. She reached for the ugliest tool in the box, and she said the quiet part out loud. "Oh, please," she snapped, gesturing at him, at the jeans, the jacket, the sneakers on the little girl. Look at him. No suit, no tie, dressed like that, and suddenly he's an expert on who paid for what, and he's lecturing all of us like he owns the plane. This is exactly the kind of thing I mean. You people always, she stopped. But not soon enough. You people. The two words hung in the recycled air, heavy and ugly and impossible to take back. Oh, honey, Ruth Palmer breathed, and it wasn't sympathy. It was a verdict. Frank Delaney muttered something under his breath that a Navy chief keeps in reserve for exactly these occasions. Emily Carter's camera caught all of it. The words, the pointing finger, the little girl flinching against her father's leg. And Emily knew, with the certainty of a woman who'd seen 100 videos go around the world, that this one was going to travel. And Marcus? Something flickered across his face for the first time. Not anger. Anger was messy, and he had trained the mess out of himself a long time ago. It was disappointment. Deep, old, familiar, bone-tired disappointment. He looked at Claire the way a doctor looks at a disease he's seen too many times to be shocked by anymore. You saw me for about 30 seconds, Marcus said quietly. You saw my clothes and my daughter's sneakers, and you decided who I was and what I paid for and what I deserved. You did all of that before I said one word to you. He shook his head, slow. You want to know the thing about me you got most wrong? It isn't the seat. It's that you looked at a man standing perfectly still and calm, holding a child's hand, and the story you told yourself was danger. Claire opened her mouth. Nothing came out. That was the moment the cockpit door opened. Captain Graham Reeves stepped into the aisle. 58, broad-shouldered, silver at the temples, 4 gold stripes catching the cabin light. Passengers quieted the instant they saw him. Captains changed the temperature of a room, and Reeves knew it, and he used it. "What's going on back here?" he asked. Nolan spoke first, and he spoke fast, and he chose his words like a man building a wall. Passengers refusing to relocate after being offered alternate seating. He's been argumentative, non-compliant, and a passenger has stated she feels unsafe. Lena's head snapped toward Nolan. That was not what had happened, and she knew it, and for 1 second it looked like she might finally say so. But the words caught behind her teeth and stayed there. "He made me feel threatened," Claire added, right on cue. "With the child right there and everything, I didn't know what he might do. Unsafe, threatened, what he might do." Every phrase another brick. Captain Reeves turned to Marcus. "Sir, I'm Captain Reeves. I understand there's a problem." "There is," Marcus said, and his voice was measured, exact. The voice of a man laying a statement into a record. "A passenger put her handbag on my daughter's paid seat. Your crew confirmed my boarding passes are valid. They confirmed hers is for a different seat. Instead of asking her to move a bag, they are asking me to move my 6-year-old to the back of the aircraft. I have not raised my voice. I have not touched anyone. I have not moved from this spot. That is the full situation, Captain. Every word of it is on 3 or 4 phones behind me." Reeves glanced at Nolan, then at Lena. "Are his passes valid?" Lena swallowed. "Yes, Captain." Is she assigned to a different seat? Yes. The truth stood up again, and this time it was wearing the captain's full attention. For one brief, clean moment, Graham Reeves had a choice. He could end it. He could ask the woman to move her bag, apologize to a tired father and a frightened little girl, and get his aircraft in the air with its dignity intact. Instead, he looked at the phones. He looked at the stalled boarding line. He looked at the well-dressed woman by the window whose complaint email would land on somebody's desk before the wheels touched down in Dallas. And he did the math that too many people in uniform have done before him. "Sir," Reeves said, and his voice had gone flat and official, "I'm going to ask you one time. Take the alternate seating so we can depart. If you refuse a lawful crew instruction, I'll have no choice but to have you removed from the aircraft. Both of you. Both of you." The little girl included in the threat. Emily inhaled sharply. Ruth whispered, "No." Frank Delaney's hands curled into fists on his armrests. And Marcus Bell went very, very still. He looked down at Maya, at his daughter, who'd been promised a window and a peaceful morning, and was instead being told, by a man with gold on his shoulders, that she and her father might be marched off the plane like criminals for the crime of sitting where their ticket said. He felt the old thing rise in him then, the thing 15 years of the hardest training on earth had taught him to hold in an iron fist. Not rage. Something colder and cleaner and far more useful than rage. He opened his mouth to answer the captain. He never got the chance. Because at that exact second, from 3 rows back, in seat 5C, there was a strangled, wet, gasping sound. A rattle. A chair scraping. A woman's voice cried out, high and terrified, "Harold? Harold, oh God, somebody. He's not breathing. He's turning blue. Somebody help." And an older man pitched forward out of his seat and into the aisle, face gray, hands clawing uselessly at his own throat, eyes wide with the specific animal panic of a human being who cannot get air. The whole cabin froze in horror. Every single person up there, the captain, the cabin manager, the flight attendant, the crying woman in 5D, the well-dressed passengers who moments ago had been the important ones, every one of them locked up. Useless, staring. Every one of them except the man they'd just called a threat. Marcus Bell moved. Later, everyone in that cabin would try to describe how fast it happened. And no two people would agree, because the truth was, it happened faster than the human eye is built to follow. 2 seconds. That's what Frank Delaney would tell the investigators. 2 seconds from the moment the man in 5C hit the aisle to the moment Marcus Bell was already there, already kneeling over him, already in control. He didn't run. That was the thing Emily Carter never forgot. Panicked people run, and they trip, and they arrive breathless and useless. Marcus flowed. He came out of that aisle stance and over the seat backs and down onto his knees beside the choking man in one single unbroken motion, like water finding the lowest point in a room, and by the time anyone else had so much as flinched. He already had 2 fingers under the man's jaw and his ear an inch from the gray, straining mouth. "He's choking, not cardiac. Airways blocked. I've got a partial." Marcus's voice had changed completely. Gone was the tired father. Gone was the patient man in the aisle. What came out now was flat, fast, and absolute, the voice of someone who has done this in far worse places than a first-class cabin. "Sir, I've got you. Not if you can hear me." "Good, we're gonna clear it. Right now." He got behind the man in a heartbeat, hauled him half upright, and his fist found the exact spot below the sternum. Not fumbling, not searching, finding. The way you only find it when your hands have done it 1,000 times in the dark. 1 thrust. 2. Controlled, brutal, precise. On the 3rd, a chunk of steak the size of a golf ball shot out onto the carpet, and Harold Whitman sucked in a single enormous whooping breath of air. But Marcus was already moving to the next thing, because he'd felt it. The body going wrong under his hands. He's arresting. He aspirated. "He's going down, you." He pointed one finger at Emily Carter without even looking up. Because he'd clocked her the second he moved past her, clocked the way she'd already dropped her phone and half risen, clocked medical on her the way he clocked everything. "You're a nurse, I can tell. Get down here." 20 years, Emily said, already on her knees across from him. Then you know the rhythm. He's got no pulse. I'm on compressions, you're on his airway, we do not stop till we get him back. He laced his hands over the old man's chest, locked his elbows, and started. And the count that came out of him was as steady as a metronome, as steady as a heartbeat borrowed and lent. 1, 2, 3, 4, the whole cabin had become a held breath around the two of them. Captain Reeves stood frozen in the aisle, the removal threat still hanging half dead in his mouth. Nolan Pierce had gone the color of the bulkhead. Lena had both hands pressed over her mouth. And the woman in 5D, Harold's wife, knelt in the aisle sobbing into her hands as a total stranger in jeans and a worn jacket refused to let her husband go. 13, 14, 15, Emily, breaths. 2 breaths. Chest rose. Marcus's hands went right back to work. Frank Delaney had gotten up out of 3D, orders be damned, and was standing over them now. And the old sailor was watching Marcus Bell's hands, watching the count, watching the impossible machine-steady calm of a man doing CPR on the floor of an airplane like it was the most ordinary thing in the world. And something in Frank's chest went tight with recognition. "Son," Frank said quietly, to no one and everyone, "where'd you learn to work like that?" Marcus didn't break his rhythm, didn't look up. 1, 2, 3, and then, flat, between counts, barely a breath, Corman. Then a team. Long time ago, 14, 15, Frank went still. A team. Every man in the Navy knew what that meant. Frank Delaney knew what that meant better than most. Special warfare. The 3 or 4% who made it through the meat grinder that broke everyone else. And a combat corpsman attached to one. A man trained to keep other men alive under fire, in the mud, in the dark, with bullets coming in, the calmest hands on the deadliest teams the country had. Frank had spent 22 years in the Navy and he had met exactly a handful of them. And every single one of them stood exactly the way this man had been standing in that aisle. Weight even, hands open, eyes quiet, nothing wasted. That was the danger Claire Ashford had seen. That was the threat. That easy, bottomless, terrifying stillness that had made a flight attendant reach for the interphone and a captain reach for the word removal. It wasn't menace. It had never been menace. Frank Delaney turned around slowly, and he looked at Claire Ashford. And then he looked at Captain Graham Reeves, and when he spoke his voice carried to the very back of the cabin. "You were about to throw a decorated Navy SEAL and his 6-year-old daughter off this airplane," Frank said, "so a woman wouldn't have to move her purse. And he's the one down on that floor right now keeping your passenger alive." Nobody answered him. There was no answer. "Come on," Marcus said under his breath. Not to any of them, to the man beneath his hands. "Not today, Harold. Your wife's right here. Come on back." 1, 2, 3, 4, and on the 12th cycle Harold Whitman coughed. His chest heaved on its own. His color changed. His eyes fluttered, unfocused, then found the face of the stranger leaning over him. A pulse thumped back to life under Marcus's fingers, weak and then stronger. And Emily Carter let out a sound that was half a laugh and half a sob and said, "He's back, Marcus, we've got him, he's back." Marcus sat back on his heels. And for just 1 second, before the professional mask came back down, the whole cabin saw the cost of it move across his face. The shake he wouldn't let into his hands. The breath he finally allowed himself. Then he was up, giving Emily fast, quiet instructions, positioning the old man on his side, telling the wife exactly what to do, telling Nolan to radio for paramedics to meet the aircraft, telling the captain, the same captain who'd threatened to remove him 90 seconds ago, precisely what that man needed and how fast he needed it. And every one of them did what he said. Instantly, without a word of argument. Because the room had finally understood what it was looking at, and it had understood it the hard way. If you're still with us this far in, you're part of this story now, and we mean that. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like if this one got to you, and tell us down in the comments which moment hit you the hardest, the little girl's question, or the 2 seconds in the aisle. We read every single one. Dad Untold Chronicles. The paramedics met the plane at the gate. Harold Whitman was wheeled off conscious, gripping Marcus's hand on the way past, unable to speak but saying everything with his eyes. His wife stopped at 2A, and she took Marcus's face in both of her shaking hands, and she pressed her forehead to his, and she wept. And the only words she could manage were thank you, thank you, thank you, over and over until the paramedics gently pulled her along. And in the middle of all of it, Seat 2C had become the loneliest place on the aircraft. Claire Ashford sat where she'd fought so hard to sit, and no one was looking at her anymore, which was so much worse than everyone looking. Her handbag, the $5,000 bag she wouldn't move for a child, sat in her lap now, both hands gripped around it, and it looked, in that moment, like exactly what it was. Nothing. A bag. She had blocked a little girl's window seat with it, and she had called the girl's father a threat. And she had almost gotten the man who just saved a life dragged off the plane in front of his daughter. She'd thought she knew what danger looked like. She'd thought she knew who to be afraid of. She had built an entire morning, an entire life, on being able to look at a person for 30 seconds and know. And now the man she'd sized up in half a minute was the reason another passenger was going home to his wife. Lena Hartwell came down the aisle. She stopped at 2A. Her service smile was gone, there was just a person left underneath it, and the person looked wrecked. "Mr. Bell," she said, very low. "I should have moved that bag the second I saw the boarding passes. I saw the truth and I looked for a reason to put it on you instead of her. I'm so sorry. To you. And to your daughter." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. Maya was back where she belonged now, kneeling up on 2A with her nose already pressed to the window, small and safe and busy watching the ground crew, her whole crisis forgotten the way only a child's can be. "I appreciate you saying it," Marcus said quietly. "The next time it's easier not to see it, I hope you remember today. That's all I'd ask." Lena nodded, eyes wet, and moved on. A few minutes later she came back and set a glass of orange juice on Maya's tray, and a hot chocolate beside it. No charge, no speech. Just a small, human thing, offered late, but offered. Claire Ashford said nothing to anyone. When the crew quietly informed her that she'd be reaccommodated on a later flight while the incident was reviewed, she gathered her bag with jerking, humiliated hands and walked toward the front, and the cameras followed her. Not cruelly, not gleefully, just as witnesses. The exact kind of witnesses she'd been so sure would take her side an hour before. She paused at 2A on her way past. She didn't look at Marcus. She looked at the little girl in the window seat. "I didn't know he was," she started, and then couldn't find the end of the sentence. "Because there wasn't an honest one. That was never the problem," Marcus said, not unkindly. "He didn't even turn from his daughter. The problem was never that you didn't know what I was. The problem was that you decided who I was without knowing anything at all." Claire's mouth closed, and she walked off the plane. The flight left 40 minutes late. By the time it did, Emily Carter's video was already climbing past 100,000 views, and then 1 million. The little girl's question, "Did we do something wrong? Is it because of me?" ran under captions in a dozen languages. The 2 words Claire said out loud. The 2 seconds in the aisle. The old sailor turning around to say what everyone had been too polite or too scared to say. And the man in 2A who never once raised his voice, who saved a stranger's life, and who buckled his daughter's seatbelt and pointed out the window as the ground fell away. Exactly the way he'd promised her he would. Somewhere over New Mexico, Maya fell asleep against her father's arm with hot chocolate on her breath and clouds in the window, and Marcus Bell sat very still so as not to wake her. And he looked out at the same sky his wife used to watch with their daughter, and he let one single tear go. And then he wiped it, and he kept watch, the way he always would. Because he'd kept the promise. Both of them. She got her window. And she learned from a father who refused to make himself small. In a cabin full of people who found out the hard way that you cannot read a human being off their clothes and their color in 30 seconds of your own assumptions. That whatever else the world tries to teach you about who you are and where you belong, there is one thing you never, ever do. You never disappear. Marcus Bell walked off that plane the same way he walked on, quiet, steady, holding his daughter's hand. That's the part people remembered, not the training. Not the 2 seconds. The dignity. The refusal to become small so that someone else could stay comfortable being wrong. If this story moved you, do 3 things. Subscribe so these stories keep coming. Like, so more people find this one. And leave a comment with 3 words, "We never disappear." Because somewhere out there, somebody needs to read them today. Dad Untold Chronicles.